Hey everybody, welcome back to We Know Severance on We Know Scripted TV. It's WeKnowSeverance.com. Make sure you're subscribed. You never miss an episode. And today we are covering feedback and theories from one of the most exciting moments in Severance history. How's that for some hyperbole at the start of the show? The aftermath of Woe's Hollow. I'm Josh Wigler. I have no woe in my heart as I introduce my colleagues here on the podcast, the doctors Amanda and Melissa, recording this podcast on a Super Bowl Sunday. As Dr. A, you're getting ready to prepare copious luxury meats for
Indeed.
a Super Bowl spread.
Yes, go Birds. I like.
How does that take hold up tomorrow? You just said go Birds. Are people like, oh yeah, they did it, or are they like,
You know what? I don't know. But I'm a Philadelphian, so I have to stand by my team no matter what the outcome is. Yeah, very exciting day. I was thinking about, going in a Severance inspired direction with like a melon bar, maybe like an egg bar. So I was thinking like, oh, could I do some marshmallows? But you really, I would not trust Lumon to cater a Super Bowl party. The snacks it's too high stakes, I think, for them to be trusted. And the snacks, apparently they don't even cater all of their valedictions. So I don't know if that's the direction to go for your Super Bowl party.
Yeah, I would not go to the Lumon Super Bowl party. I wouldn't, Melissa. I wouldn't go to too many Super Bowl parties. Is maybe a hot take. I don't know.
Yeah, it's certainly not a hot take for me. I forgot the Super Bowl was happening today because I don't care. But have fun.
Yeah, great. I'm a very conflicted brain injury researcher.
This is
Philadelphian.
The
problem. So I don't want to gloss over the conflict here. I'm always team snack. Like I love chili, totally. I love wings, I love guacamole, like I love all of that stuff. We're gonna have a very sumptuous spread. Josh, I was actually thinking, should Lumon be doing some athletic competitions?
Ooh.
Do the innies need a little bit more bread and circus to distract them from these revolutionary tendencies that they're exhibiting?
Should they do some sort of like academic decathlon, like some sort of like competition to see who gets to be the heir to the severed floor of Lumon?
Yeah, I feel like it would be something like a finger trap. Like I feel like they would be doing like 3-legged races. It would be like a little bit more field day style.
Yeah, I can see that. Oh, very field day, which is of course notoriously rigged, but we really don't have to go there. Of course, we've got a lot of different places we have to go here on the Severance Feedback and Theories show here on WeKnowSeverance.com. You can send your feedback in at any time. Severance, RHAP at gmail.com. And I'll tell you, we got a lot of email this week. People have a lot of thoughts on Woe's Hollow. So our inbox was lit. We've got a lot of feedback from all of you that we'll get into across the show. We'll also bring in stuff from across the rest of the Severance internet, not the least of which is the Severance Reddit has really exploded in the days since Woe's Hollow. Lots of memes. Big meme factory over at r/Severance/Apple TV Plus. It's important because I went to r/Severance. It was a totally different thing.
Oh no.
It's not a bad thing. It's just completely different. It's not what we came with.
Yeah, the Reddit is bumping. The feedback is coming in. Our Discord is very active. Like this was an episode that it's been really fascinating to witness the reaction from the fandom to this episode because, we noted that this is it's a departure in terms of, the look, the setting of the show. It took a big swing. I think that worked really, really well for a lot of people. There's other people that it didn't work as well for. So it's been interesting to see the response to this episode. And, we were in the midst of building this momentum around Mark's reintegration. This was a little bit of pumping the brakes on that plot line. We got a lot of Irving. Is this the end of Irving? So there's a lot of really, really copious, luxury, meaty stuff to get into.
Oh my. Certainly. Lots to get into. Big revelations. We don't have to, keep playing the is she or isn't she Helly or Helena question anymore. So lots of reactions to that, of course. One of the things that I saw on the subreddit this past weekend was someone screen grabbing the claymation video, the Lumon's hearing you video, where Helly is bobbing for pineapples, and the angle up is basically exactly what happens when she proverbially goes bobbing for pineapples in Woe's Hollow. So just
Irving was bobbing for truth here.
He was bobbing for truth apples. So yeah, some great stuff there. Lots on the Dieter Egan of it all as well, which I have to admit has been occupying some of my attention as well. And feeling like more and more what a dense dingus I am, not understanding immediately that, of course, this is a totally made up person. And someone on Reddit, and I missed I don't have the citation for it, but somebody online was remarking about how it makes so much sense that the entirety of the innie, outie, Lumon project comes down to the idea that one dude was really embarrassed about that one time he jerked it in the woods.
Yeah.
Story checks out.
Yep, it does.
People are onto this. We talked about this in our recap pod, this possibility that Dieter is not actually another person, but that this is part of Kier, and this whole idea that we have parts of ourselves. We know that Kier famously tamed his tempers, and that this is like resolving those parts that are unseemly that we don't want to know about. Fascinating that in this episode where we get the story of Dieter Egan sort of succumbing to his lustful urges and then being destroyed by the other part of himself, this is an episode where we see Helena succumb to her lustful urges, and she is not the person who emerges at the end of the episode. It's actually the other part of herself in Helly. Something I did see on Reddit, and I'm sorry because I can't find the person to attribute this before, but Dieter Egan, believe it or not, fam, is an anagram for...
I knew you were going to go down the anagram.
AI generated.
Yes, we received this feedback from a couple of different people, including Lucy, who also sent in fascinating elevator ding analysis, is what I'm calling this. Elevator ding analysis. Yeah. A really big email on EDA, which I sent off to the two of you shortly before we hit record. We need to take a closer look at this for the next feedback show. But Lucy called in to say, yeah, Dieter Egan, an anagram for AI generated. Oh no.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of speculation that like none of this is real, right? That the whole thing is happening inside their minds. And I do think that there's very possible and then there was a friend of the pod, Grace Leader, did an interview with Dan Erickson. And one of the thing that stood out to me from reading it was she sort of asked about, is this all real? And he's like, that's a very interesting question, which I was like, Dan Erickson, what are you doing? That's not an answer. That doesn't answer our question. That's a not answer. But there you go. That was a not answer to that question, which I thought.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not real,
what is real?
It explains how they were able to access the tallest waterfall in the whole planet.
Nick W has been to that waterfall and shared photos of it. And it was so funny because, just Nick's tallest waterfall in the world just absolutely cracked me up. It was so
I have a lot of friends in the tri-state area who were posting pictures about that waterfall. So certainly a place you can go and visit. I have not, unfortunately, seen the world's tallest waterfall, which is a shame for me.
Yeah, it's weird. I've seen so many really tall waterfalls, but I've been to Niagara
Never one
Falls,
quite so tall,
but never one quite so majestic as that one.
Yeah, I've seen speculation that this entire Ortbo is not actually, we're not actually going to Dieter Egan National Park or another place in the outside world, but in fact, the MDR innies are still stuck on the severed floor, and this is some kind of like illusion that they're being shown or something that's being manipulated in their minds. That is possible. I think that for me, that would be a less successful answer to what has happened here, because if Lumon has the power to create this like fully vivid hallucination of like what the outside world is, then why is this the time that they're using it in this way? It kind of like invites to me this question of like, if they can do this incredible thing, then then is this like fully the Matrix, and what can we trust in this show that is real? And
which would be I think a different show is sort of my feeling on it. That would be like having a very, very, very big game breaking twist like pretty late into the run. That feels like the kind of thing that's part of your premise, not a twist. So I would be surprised if that's what we're dealing with in some sort of world where none of this is real, or that the lengths of the technology go so far as to matrixify, like holodeck, Woe's holodeck. Like, is that what we're dealing with here? I don't think so.
Because the other thing is like, why would Irving's like attempted drowning have worked then, right? Like Milchek didn't have to do anything.
I mean, in the Matrix, if you died in the Matrix, you died IRL too. So, it could be Matrix rules.
Yeah, maybe.
But that seems like a lot. And it just doesn't seem like this show. And what this show seems to me more and more like is one that exists in a huge caricature version of our world, in which like the extent of Lumon's power and money and influence, as well as the extent of their ambition, is perhaps superhuman to some extent, right? Like, I think to the degree that they think that they can achieve some form of immortality, if anybody on Earth had the funds to pursue such an agenda, they would. And that's the world that we exist in, and it becomes a very weird, surreal trip through all of that as a result. But that's why it feels uncanny to me, because it's heightened so much so that it stands out, so that these ideas that the show is exploring of like, if you really stop and listen to the Dieter Egan storyline and you stop to think of, this is why we're doing any of this, and then map it onto some stuff that you experience in our reality, I think it maps on quite neatly in some ways. I think that's much less effective if within the world of Severance there is this illusory world. I think it is enough that Severance itself is an illusory world and we're being invited into it.
So, I mean, do you two make anything of this anagram, like imagining that this is a nugget
Dieter
that
Egan
the writers
and AI generated,
that the writers are implanting here? And I've noticed other folks on Reddit have pointed to other things that sort of suggest that there's some AI theme. I think there was something on PD's map. Do we think that there is some AI generated component of what is happening at Lumon?
I mean, is that some of what could be happening with Gemma? Is that some of what Cold Harbor is doing? Is some sort of learning system that is trying to, from whatever input, recreate a like human person and like recreate their brain and mind? And it certainly, it certainly makes sense. I think that it would fit with a lot of the theories around what MDR is doing, and
the board
might explain
maybe
some of, yeah, exactly. I do think that there's probably definitely some potential. I don't think that it's going to be AI in terms of like what we understand AI to be in our current world, but I do think that Severance does a good job of taking the technology of today and leaping it a little bit into the future and saying, okay, if this is, if we make a couple different assumptions about where this could go, then eventually something else could be possible. How the goats fit into all of that, I have no idea, but it certainly could be. I think it's really interesting. I also do think though that sometimes things are just references that aren't clues, they're just references, right?
it's
So
like
there's very
vibes,
possible,
right?
yeah, exactly, right? Like I do think, like my assumption is that the like Montauk file for Irving is a Eternal Sunshine reference as an homage to like a show with kind of a similar, a movie with a similar premise, but not actually like a clue of any kind.
Yeah,
So
I think that that's right. Like, and this show does vibes, and I think we get like very good confirmation of that. I don't think that the claymation Lumon video where we see Irving behind Helly and she's submerged in the water is supposed to be a clue that there was some future predicting thing happened. I think that that's like a cute artistic like way of kind of creating this whole vibe of the world. So I think because we know that the creators are doing this, I think it tells us some things are vibes. Not everything is a clue that shows that things are being orchestrated in a particular way. And I'm very happy. I'm very happy with that explanation for some of these little Easter eggs that we're noticing.
That being said, on the point of AI generated and Dieter Egan pointing towards that, and just the thought that this could be a show that has things to say, perhaps even like integral to its overarching point levels of things to say about AI, wouldn't shock me at all for a show that is so deeply interested in the plight of the worker, right? And I think one of the biggest conversations in labor right now is the rise of AI and what that's going to do to people in the workforce. And that is a rapidly developing and escalating question. For Severance to be such a timely show in so many ways, whether it was, harping on the isolation that we felt in the immediate aftermath of COVID when this show basically came out, or when this show came out actually at a moment where people were now starting to go back to work, some of them as if nothing happened at all. Like, I think it would make so much sense to me that in the genesis of a show that has had some, I think, like really some really insightful looks ahead at the conversations around our world and our culture, that they would be right on the vein of AI. And when we're talking about things like clones, are we really, missing that we're talking about the idea of like cloning a personality and cloning this and like doing that in some sort of AI generated way? I think that there is some sort of algorithmic agenda here to Lumon is not a theory that's by any stretch out of bounds or out of Ortbone bounds.
Because you mentioned, Josh, the kind of commentary on the plight of the worker, I did come across an extremely interesting post on Reddit from Redditor Alejandro about a note on the etymology of the word robot. Because while we're talking about anagrams, Ortbo is an anagram for the word robot. And this was a really interesting post. The Redditor points out that robot is a relatively new word. It's actually based on a Czech word, robota, forced labor, which in turn is derived from rab, meaning slave. And this term was only very recently coined in 1920 in a play called Rossum's Universal Robots by Carol Capek. And I'm about to just like blow your mind, giving you some plot points from this play.
Okay.
The robots in RUR, first of all, the RUR, the robots are living creatures based on synthetic organic matter. So they're not like the kind of completely mechanical robots that we think of today.
Okay, so they're very Westworld.
Very Westworld, exactly. They resemble humans in all outward ways. There is a robot character in RUR who's named, wait for it, Helena.
Oh.
And her namesake is a real woman from a wealthy family who wants to see robots treated as living beings rather than as appliances. And she destroys the formula that is used to create robots, but in part because of her actions, robots end up overthrowing humans and kill them all, except for one man. So anyway, this I think is fascinating.
What does it say about larval pouches?
You know what? I have to familiarize myself with the original check. Yeah, I think that this is, I mean, we've noted that Helly was an interesting name from the very start. It stood out as like, where does this name come from? We find out that it's short for Helena. I think the themes of this play and the choice of this name, which is not a common name, are too on point for this to be a coincidence. I thought that this was a really astute point from this Redditor.
Well, and also to unpack it a little bit further, then I think some of the implications could be that, folks who have hope for the greater combination of Helena and Helly may be heartened by what sounds like eventually, like, if not like a thawing towards the plight of the quote unquote robot, actual like full-throated support of the robot. So like, is
very interesting. Yeah.
Is there still stuff like, that's interesting to think about. And like, could you go back and look at all of the Helena scenes and look at all of the things that Helena has done? And if you like craned your neck and like closed your eye and looked at it a certain way, could you envision the scenario where she has been working towards this the whole time?
Yeah.
That's a very TV tropey thing to do and wouldn't shock me here. Hard to see, but wouldn't completely feel out of nowhere.
Yeah. Now
or
that
maybe, sex with Mark S was the wake-up call that she needed.
Oh, revelatory indeed.
Revelatory. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit more about Helena. I think no surprise that she is a main topic of conversation. Severance fandom wide, let alone We Know Severance fandom wide, of which Ben Stiller and Adam Scott are fans. So we got this bit of feedback. This was from Leah. Leah had written in and asked, what was Helena's game at the fire pit? Why was she laughing and trying to get everybody else to laugh too? Does she just think it's funny because she knows that the fourth appendix is totally fake and she can't stop herself? Or if she's doing it on purpose, why? I think that's an interesting question to bring into this conversation we're having about Helena right now, actually, of like, where is she in sort of her, if she's on any kind of like evolving journey towards a greater opinion of the plight of the worker? Where is she on that journey, if she's on it at all?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it feels as simple as if this was written potentially by Rickon, she, it's very silly. And so I think that she might just be both not taking it particularly seriously because it is not some like OG scripture, but also she's trying to like ingratiate herself and pretend to be Innie Helly, right? And Innie Helly would not be taking this seriously.
Yeah.
So I do think that it could be that simple, but and I think I'm with you that I don't know that I imagine that Helena from the moment that we've met her has been bought in and secretly trying to take down Lumon, but I could see it as some sort of like multi-season arc for her for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not totally bought in that Rickon is now the author of all of
Also
the Kier literature, because I have to say, like, we've noticed this from season 1 that when we hear the handbook, when we hear the language in the perpetuity wing, it has this flavor. And like, I think that we even talked about it in season 1 that like Rickon seems to have like a similar kind of ornate type of writing style, but I think that that's a little bit more just the voice of the universe of the show, less than it suggests to me that it comes from the same author. I do think that this Appendix 4 is probably, you know, a relatively new invention. Like everything in the Severance world is just crafted so that it can be used to manipulate the innies, you know, for a particular purpose at a particular time. So I wouldn't be surprised if Helena was hearing this for the first time and found it very funny. I still do like my theory that this might have been a push and pull where Milchick is trying to dissuade Helena from her quest to seduce Mark S, which is like, I can't imagine that the reason that Lumon wanted to put her down there was for them to pursue a romance. I think that their motivation was clearly Mark S needs his team to complete Cold Harbor. He won't do it without them. And Helly is part of that. And the reason that Helena was game to go is because she had her own different motivation, which has to do with potential feelings or wanting to have this experience, which has been pretty obvious, I think, from the start. So if they are being surveilled, I wouldn't be surprised if this was part of it. So I think that the idea that Helena and Lumon are always completely on the same page, like we can't take that for granted the same way we couldn't take it for Harmony Cobell. So I think that this is like maybe not exactly the type of romantic getaway that Helena wanted, and she's making light of this and being silly about it.
Yeah. Some questions about how the Dieter story maps onto Helena's story. So this came in from Britt. Britt wrote in, first thing
Britt
I clocked.
Lauer?
It's not Britt Lauer. It
Oh.
could be. I mean, it certainly could be. It is. It's Britt Lauer. Britt Lauer writes in and says, first thing I clocked is that the language used to describe Kier hearing Dieter masturbate sounds like Kier likes it. Is it an incest thing, or is it Dieter is a lustful part of Kier that he is ashamed of and tames and destroys? Mark and Helena had sex and quote unquote spilled their legacy. What woeful thing will befall them? Is Mark Chaos's whore, woefully realizing he had sex with Helena Egan, betrayed Helly, did it while searching for Gemma, and outie Mark will eventually have to process all of that. Some big questions about how all of this maps onto Mark as well, it turns out.
Yeah. Gosh, it the whole premise of this conversation is so silly. It's just there's parts of it.
Yes.
This show is so serious and so beautiful and metaphorical and all of these things, and also
and then when you break it down for parts,
it's yeah. Sometimes it just makes me giggle. But
yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think we covered that. The Dieter Egan story is like, this is, you know, a part of Kier. I feel pretty confident in that. I think that the interesting part of this question is, what is the fallout for innie Mark after this? We really don't get very much, like we don't get anything like from him aside from like that very brief moment after Helena turns to Helly. You have to, I think we'll probably talk more about this, but this is like along the reintegration plot line for Mark too. So to the extent that he is still two separate selves who might have part of him that's like, first of all, there's part of him that was falling in love with Helly, and now he finds out that the person who seduced him was not Helly, was Helena, who's not only not the person he had fallen in love with, but also represents the Egans, which is like the most evil force in his universe. So he's experiencing that betrayal. And he's also going to get in touch with the part of him who is in love and mourning his wife, Gemma.
Right.
So we've talked about this polycule of innies and outies and love quadrangles and all that involves. And as Mark reintegrates, this is going to be some major mind F.
So Britt sent in feedback about this as well. And I thought that this was great and worth bringing into the conversation, and certainly fits into what we're talking about right now. Britt says, the way that Mark's reintegration is occurring to the innie totally changes the story beats that I'd anticipated. Rather than it being a flood of information shared between innie and outie simultaneously, it's a slow leaking for the innie. This is something the innie didn't consent to. So again, the outie is subjecting the innie to something. Innie Mark will experience painful grief that isn't his own, the pain of life, etc. And maybe he'll realize he doesn't want any of this. Maybe it's not going to be the triumphant Megamark information sharing the way we imagine. Megamark is an incredible thing to imagine. But more, furthering the idea of the innie's lacking of agency. It opens up a lot of questions about where this goes. And I think one of the observations that I've seen about this episode is because we go from Mark at the end of episode 3 beginning reintegration to this episode being completely void of that storyline, except for the one moment where Helena turns to Gemma from his point of view. And it was like, okay, that's it. That's all we're getting. But when you really do stop down and think about it, that was a huge chunk of information, because that is a shocking thing that any Mark has no idea why he's experiencing, and the places where that could potentially take him, both in terms of like how he'll have to reconcile that, but also like what he might feel about the person on the outside putting this on him, could be fascinating in a show that's really so invested in the idea of identity. Cool stuff. I mean, like bad shit, but cool stuff.
No, it's very, go ahead, Melissa.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say that some of the conversation around people who were a bit thrown off by this episode, I think that the placement of it in the season is like a big reason why. So, Adam H, fellow Whirlwind podcaster, was talking about basically that he fully anticipates looking back on the season and maybe even thinking fondly of this episode, but the placement of it here feels like a bad choice overall in terms of the direction of the show. I think the episode itself had tons and tons of positive characteristics and character moments. Obviously love the Irv stuff, but I think the reason why I struggled with it is due to how it's placed at this point in the season more than anything that we actually saw on screen. And so I think it was this like interruption of the reintegration story, the fact that it's like the consequences of last episode are not really felt this episode, I think is the big part of why this was maybe a bit, some people felt really thrown off, especially by the first half of this episode. I know Jared also wrote in like wondering about the casual Severance viewer and thinking that they would probably be just like very confused by the first half and then maybe bought in by the second half.
This is an episode for the Sev heads, Woe's Hollow is for the base. And so it's a good moment to check in. Are you part of the base or not? Because it feels like this could be a sign that Severance is making a show for Sev heads, which for me is great, but may not have wider appeal. Who knows?
It's interesting because I'm sort of like I'm feeling torn. There's like two me's. There's a part of me that wants to empathize with this feeling from the fan base, like this didn't work, and I understand that this was an interruption of the reintegration plot line, like might have felt like a disturbed momentum. I mean, one of the challenges of this kind of writing, and we've talked about how the show is really like taking advantage of all of the opportunities you can have when there is a character that is bifurcated with different access to different information, and what kind of opportunities that affords you for storytelling. And some of those have been really powerful. But the other side of that is that one of the challenges is that we have these plot lines that are weaving through the outie world and the innie world, and the opportunities to connect them or interrupt them can be something that you can imagine creators tripping over. So we don't really know what integration is like, and maybe we'll learn more about integration that puts this in a context that makes it work more. Maybe we'll even discover things about Mark's internal experience throughout this episode that shed some more light on it. So I'm still sort of reserving any judgment about how interrupted this feels. There was somebody on Reddit who pointed out, what we do know about reintegration, and that comes from Petey in season 1, who said it's like having two different lives suddenly stitched together, but the relativity's effed. So my first day at Lumon's as far back as my 5th birthday, and with two pasts, it blurs the present too, but they said it will get better. So if we imagine that this gives us some context for understanding what Mark will be experiencing, I think we have to see a lot more from Mark going through this process. But I'm very excited to see this be a bigger part of the show coming forward.
Yeah, Ben behind the curtain, obviously a very lost, aware individual, was speculating that maybe the story isn't being told entirely chronologically. I think so far, like to this point, it has been. But I do think that that's an interesting point about the relativity of it, is that what we may be experiencing as chronology might not be what the innies, and particularly innie Mark, is experiencing.
Interesting. Hard for me to see that, but open to it for sure. But also open to tip my cap to Ben, who is one of the creative forces behind Down the Hatch, a podcast here that you can listen to, and you can go back to the archives. We talked about all of Lost, and what would come to mind for me in the Lost example is an infamous episode called Across the Sea that really didn't work for a lot of reasons for a lot of different people, not the least of which, and one of the biggest reasons, in my opinion, is its timing. It is placed in a very, very inopportune moment in the season. It comes right after some really heavy monumental stuff happens for some characters you've known for the whole freaking show, and there are 3 episodes left to go in the whole freaking thing, and suddenly momentum just comes to a screeching halt for also an episode that isn't so good. So like that's really, really difficult. Here, I'm not prepared to say we're suffering from Across the Sea syndrome. It's too early to know. We are not even totally halfway through season 2 yet. We almost are, but there's a lot of road still left to travel, not the least of which is what is the immediate fallout from this episode? We don't know, like we don't know what's going to happen next with Irving. We have so many questions about Irving. Patrick had written in with a big email about Irving, laying out the case for why he feels like Irving isn't gone and we will see Irving again. So hope for Irving people. Josiah, one of our many, had written in and said had a lot of questions about Irving figuring out that Helly was in fact her outie, and wondering how much of that had to do with him potentially working with Ragabi, and the fact that like could he be going through some reintegration? But more specifically, we get to see what dreaming looks like for the innies through Irving. And a lot of questions also from some of our other listeners about like, well, what did it look like for Irving to stop being innie Irving for these people? Like, what is that? Is that we just turned him back into outie Irving in front of all of you, and then outie Irving turns around and goes, hey, what the fuck? Or did they have some sort of remote control that can pause you down, that can stop you down? And what are the implications of that? So while Irving's story could be, any Irving story anyway, could be resolved to some measure of imagination, outie Irving's is wide open, first of all. And I think that they've still introduced enough compelling ideas about John Turturro playing a severed character, whether it's the Irving that we know or another form of severed character. There's still just a lot there.
Yeah. There's so much in what you just said, Josh, to potentially
a lot that like 6 episodes of a season could really dig into. So maybe this episode is perfectly placed.
Yeah. I wanna sit. So one of the points that you made was just about sort of what is the fallout from the events of this episode, and the questions about the very immediate fallout and the logistics of the Ortbo in general. Like, we don't know how these characters got to this place. Like, we don't know how Irving ends up on the ice
Yes, we've got 1,000 questions about that. Like, we could just say that like a large percent of our emails were questions about the logistics of how they
of
set
the
the
ins and
ortho
the
up,
outs. Yes.
which normally I would be like, it's a television commercial. Like, just watch the show. Like, you know, it's
Yeah.
fine. It's like, don't think about that so hard. But on a show like Severance, actually, I think it does matter because like every like sort of like step of agency of the outies matters insofar as it impacts the continued existence and the, let alone like, you know, the experiences of the innies. So like, did like Outie Irving was like, okay, now you're gonna just like tiptoe out there on the ice. Is he not gonna be like, you're just gonna leave me there? You know, like I think they would have questions. So
I mean, if they orchestrate their arrivals and their departures by staggering them 15 minutes on the elevator, they're not going to put all these outies together in a bus and like deposit them
I'm
on
sort
the
of
ice.
assuming helicopter, but yeah, I staggered helicopters dropping them off one by one.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we have some intriguing possibilities with the different security protocols that we've already seen. They're beehive, branch transfer, clean slate, elephant, freeze frame, Glasgow, goldfish, lullaby, open house, and overtime.
Now we know what Glasgow is.
Now we know what Glasgow is.
I was going to say, Josiah brought this up, and Amanda, you were familiar with this Glasgow coma
the
scale.
Glasgow coma scale is something that I deal with every single day of my life, Melissa.
What is it?
It's a measure of depth of coma, and it is common. It's the most common measure of brain injury severity. So the Glasgow coma scale measures your alertness on different dimensions, including eye-opening verbal response and motor response, and you get scores on each of those scales that go from 1 to 4, 1 to 6, and you add everything up and it tells you it's considered depth of coma. But if you're comatose, then you don't have any level of responding, you would have a very severe brain injury, and then it goes up and down. So the idea that this would be something about kind of turning off consciousness, I think it seems like the way we see the Glasgow block work for Helena is that it's somehow blocking whatever the severance tether is that switches from on to off. So whatever she's experiencing that's switching things on and off in the other innies and outies is being blocked, I think. And I imagine that it's like some allusion to this because it has to do with turning on and off consciousness in a way. But you can imagine that maybe like the freeze frame protocol or the goldfish protocol is a way to just like put somebody to sleep. There's a lullaby protocol. So, I mean, are they kind of, sedated in a way that they can control using the chip to
all
transfer
of this should be
them?
in the fine print, by the way. If Milchick in episode 2 can be believed.
I know that was in your intro packet, Mark.
Yeah.
So I think that's logistically, I would imagine that Irv is not like coming to as Outie Irv and he's like, where's my motorhead? I think he's probably being like turned off and then transported somewhere.
Yeah.
Intriguingly, what is the future of Outie Irv? I don't know if this is a guy, like if when you're fired, does Severance like let you just go and be? PD was presumably, I think, fired is what we would have to imagine. Like, I'm just wondering if we have another reference for the post termination life of a severed employee.
No, not yet, certainly. No one comes to mind for this.
Yeah, but lots of interesting stuff based on what you were talking about, Josh. First of all, some people having questions about the like logic of Irving like figuring this out, and for me, I think it totally tracks, right? That I think first of all, the Night Gardener comment is weird, and I think he sort of picks up on that, and then I think this like idea that Helly wasn't cruel, right? And like noticing that it's like, oh, you're not who you say you are. And then I think the logical leap then, without having to know who Helena Egan is, of just like, only one family of people could put their outie on the severed floor and would have such a vested interest in this. So I think that to me it all tracks, but I do know that there was some kind of questions around that. The other thing that you mentioned, the dreaming of it all, and Touchdown Tommy speculated that the tents were somehow a way to like stop the innies from dreaming, because again, this might be some kind of subconscious mingling of memories or whatever. And so the
or
reason
whatever,
why,
like when you go down, you know, the elevator, or you step outside to the emergency exit, like could that tech exist here in the tent?
Yeah. And so Irving slept not in the tent. And so is that why he was the only one, as far as we know, who dreamt? I thought was super interesting. And then the last piece that I thought was really interesting related to Irving was a little bit of speculation around the dead seal. So first of all, people had to inform me that there are seals in the Bible, but they're not animal seals. That was corrected for me, that there's like the 7 seals. I don't know. Anyway, some people speculated that it was more
like
Bible
wax
stuff.
Seals, like that kind of
I
seal?
don't. There
Like
maybe
like scroll, like I don't know. There's I saw some discussion of this.
Yeah. So the 7 seals of Revelation, there's like the 4 horsemen, but then also other things. Anyway,
good enough
I
for
don't
me.
know. Yeah, but again, Tommy had the speculation that could it be an homage to Irving's military past, and was he a Navy SEAL? And sort of just a metaphor there about where Irving will end up by the end of the episode, which I thought was
seal.
Also interesting. And that was just sort of this other piece, was this reminder of like who Outie Irving is. And so to me, it makes sense that like innie Irving, although he doesn't have any of those memories, we know that Outie Irving is like doing some detective work. He's like putting all of this together. And so to me, it tracks that innie Irving is like capable of also that same skill set, even if he doesn't like know about it, right? He's got that same sort of ability.
I'm yearning for Irving. Like I want more Outie Irving, and the possibility that Outie Irving and Outie Bert could connect. Like that's very much been seeded through the first couple of episodes. Because you mentioned the dream, Melissa, and because people were curious about how Irving puzzled this out, I have seen analysis of Irving's dream experience. People have noted that on the refining screen, there's numbers that if you track where they are in the alphabet, what letters those numbers would correspond to, it spells Egan. There's EGAN, Egan. The shape it makes, we noted the eye, but if you look closely, it looks like Helly's face. Woe is sitting in the cubicle where Helly would have been sitting. So I think Irving has the pieces and they get put together in his dream. I think one thing that was clear from listening to the Ben and Adam pod and also watching the behind the episode is they didn't necessarily, the creators, anticipate that there would be so much speculation that Helly was actually Helena on the severed floor. The audience was like a little bit ahead of that. So I think that while I saw a lot of speculation, at least for the Sev heads among us, that Irving was onto this for a while now. But the show, I think in the dream, was sort of giving you the justification, like this is the last cherry on top for how he pieces it all together.
Yeah, the Zach cherry.
And I think that's, again, I'm just very impressed that, because again, in the interview that Grace did with Dan, he talked about basically that this mystery, had it gone on for several more episodes, would have been tired and talked all the way out. And I think it's so interesting that despite not knowing how good the fan base was going to be at picking this up, Dan Erickson still had the forethought of like, this is an early season reveal. This is not a season finale reveal.
This is not the big twist at the end, right?
No, and honestly, this could have gotten very, very tiring. You know, and so good instincts to do this early on, I think. Some some questions about Mark and Helena. And this was a question specifically, I think, for the brain scientists among us. Multiple emails to the doctors and also Josh this week. So Claire had written in, I was quite taken with Mark's confidence, considering that he was effectively losing his, wait for it, verge innie.
Oh my gosh.
I'm pretty sure that the email was written specifically to put that out there.
And I support it.
I support this as
applause.
well. Claire continues, without getting too explicit, is the know-how for that particular activity stored in the same part of the brain that allowed any Irving to drive capably during the OTC? I would be lying if I myself didn't have this question at one point in contemplating the episode. I was like, hey, wait a second.
Oh my gosh. Is it like riding a bike?
Skill level translate too?
Yeah. Well, it's so fascinating because
could your outie lover be like a really lazy lover, but your innie lover is a freak in the sheets? Is that possible?
I think that's quite possible.
just ask Dylan, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I would say so, like, just to speculate on this very fun and interesting topic, to the extent that sexual intercourse is a skill and habit and not a declarative knowledge base, I would say absolutely any learning of this that Mark has done on the outside in terms of like what people would commonly refer to as muscle memory, is going to be like fully retained in his innie form. It's a procedural memory. It's a separate system. It's not the same part of our brains that store information for facts and knowledge. And then, of course, the lustful feelings, arousal, like none of that depends on the declarative memory system. So all of that is a go. And I would venture, if I had to like speculate a little bit more broadly, that the innie, unencumbered with all of those like thinky feelings and baggage and like all of those, the uncomfortable like memories that we bring to our experiences, like without any of that to potentially weigh him down. I mean, maybe innie Mark is like that's the guy you want.
Wow.
Incredible.
Yeah. In all three of the beds that you grew up in.
As you move from bed to bed. That
race car bed
at a certain point. Like, let's not go too down the bed rabbit hole.
Wow. Wild. Only on the We Know Severance podcast are you getting that kind of answer here. Trying to think what else from the episode to bring in. I mean, our conversation has kind of hit a lot of the different questions that we've gotten along the way. I was only going to add that some notes on the doppelgangers. A lot of people really feeling like those feel like animatronics, the way that the figures in the perpetuity wing feel like animatronic, or at least have that sort of quality to them.
I felt very silly when that was pointed out to us. I was like, yep, that makes the most sense.
Melissa, we're doing a lot of hard work. Nobody else is answering these questions about memory systems. I like that a lot. One, because it explains why they didn't freeze to death. And two, because it's just like a lovely little picking up on what seemed like a throwaway line from Gwendolyn Y, that, they had the animatronic Egans at her perpetuity wing. So I like that they're weaving those little things throughout the season.
What was the thing you were going to bring up, Dr. Amanda?
I was going to bring up Irving's final message to his good buddy Dylan, and I would love for us to speculate about what Irving's intention was there and what it might have meant. And Irving shouts to Dylan, "Hang in there."
Okay.
That's the last thing he says. And we also know that Irving has been sharing with Dylan information about what he saw in the testing, like what he saw when he woke up, about the testing hallway. We also know that Irving has been drawing pictures. He talked to Felicia about it. Felicia had some information. So let's say Innie Irving is, out of the picture now because of his termination.
Sure.
There are some like intriguing other characters who could be picking up on this mission that Innie Irving had to discover what this testing floor hallway is. And what he says to Dylan is hang in there. And if you go back to the newly renovated break room, you'll see that there were a number of inspirational posters on the wall. And one of them was a hang in there poster.
Oh,
but
man.
Instead of an adorable little kitty cat, it's actually our hero, Dylan, arms outstretched, holding up the switches for the overtime contingency. So it's Dylan in the poster, and Irving says, hang in there. So
that's the corporation like making t-shirts out of like the thing that you did to advance your cause. Like that was so cool, you guys. That was so cool what you did.
Dylan. Like the pink washing and like the whatever it is.
Yeah,
so
great.
So
okay, so that's obviously a thing. That's like that's like our Blastdoor map that we're waiting for.
Some sort of like note on the other side of the poster.
Is there a note? Is he directing?
Yeah.
Is he directing Dylan to this place where he has left him a clue to find? Is there something about the poster or what Dylan did in the OTC that he'll have to do again? Like this is a clue. This is Irving's way of saying like, you have to pick up this mission. So I'm very, very curious to see exactly what this is a reference
to. That feels like an incredibly clean line towards that. So I now would be shocked if that doesn't come into play. The thing that it opens up for me as a question is we didn't see him do anything, right? So like we haven't seen him do anything in terms of like leaving something behind.
No. Yeah.
So what else could what could he have done before Woe's Hollow? Like what are the things that Irving could have done and completed and learned before this episode that could still come into play in the future? I think that you don't necessarily need Irving to continue Irving's storyline, especially because like we saw him go to Felicia and like
our girl like, Felicia.
Like did they get further along on that plot than we've gotten to see yet? I guess now is sort of a question.
Or even if we hadn't, just to like talk to Felicia like could be an option here, right? And then the idea that Dylan now has to be the one to go talk to O&D is just, I think that feels like very juicy plot. I'm very
good.
Yes,
very good.
Poor Felicia. She lost Bert. Now she loses Irving.
Yeah, and now she's about to get harassed by Dylan.
If she gains a Dylan, I don't know. Yeah,
wow.
I love Dylan, but not sure if it was a good trade.
Yeah,
I don't think so. Well, a lot happening in Severance Land this week, clearly, and still more to come as we hit episode 5 in just a couple of days.
Oh my gosh.
Which, after we finish watching episode 5, that will be the moment that we are halfway through season 2 of Severance. Unbelievable, but we will not start counting down to 0 quite yet. We are instead going to count down towards episode 5. We'll be back. WeKnowSeverance.com. That's where you want to go to find all the subscriber information. Hit subscribe on your podcatcher of choice. Leave a review if you would be so kind. You can also send in feedback, severance, RHAP @gmail.com. See if your feedback and theory makes it onto the feedback and theories show. We have the wonderful problem of more emails than we can possibly get through on the show. Keep them coming. We would love to hear from all of you. We're reading them all. It's a really fun time. You can also talk to us on the internet. I'm at Round Howard, wherever you can find me. Amanda, where are you?
I am at Dr. Amanda R on Blue Sky.
And Melissa?
Melissa Woodward 28 on wherever. Yep, Blue Sky for the most part.
And Amanda, just I have no skin in the game, and this again being the last time I can say this, and we'll see how this comment holds up. Go Birds.
Yeah. I'll say the Eagles are green, which is very kind of like innie color
Sure.
coded. And then the Chiefs are red, which we've noted is a little bit more outie color coded. So this might be a battle for, who's going to prevail, the innies or the outies.
Okay, so if the Eagles win, the innies will have a happy ending.
I think they take over. I think they take over the body.
And then who are they playing?
The Chiefs.
The Kansas City Chiefs.
And then, so if Kansas City Chiefs win, then I guess that makes sense because that's like Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift, Empire. Like that's royal. Like you're going up against royalty here. So those are definitely the outies.
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Uphill battle, I think, potentially for the innies. People can let us know how our Super Bowl prediction went when we get back together in just a few days for more of the Severance podcast. Until then, everybody take care. Bye-bye.